Hello everyone, have a nice evening. Enjoy a good ghost story with the gentle sound of rain from BLACKRIDGE Stories, and sleep well. If you find these stories interesting, please subscribe and comment for me. Thank you very much everyone, and now, without making you wait any longer, let's go to part 1 of the story, Shadows of Sloss Furnaces. The rain had just stopped when Marcus turned off the engine of his dusty pickup truck, the wipers frozen mid-swipe. He stared at the rusting gates of Sloss Furnaces, a long-abandoned steel mill on the outskirts of Birmingham. A dense fog rolled lazily across the lot, clinging to the iron skeletons like the fingers of a ghost unwilling to let go. "Looks like hell on earth," he muttered. Marcus wasn't here for history or haunted legends. He was a photographer, chasing the decaying beauty of forgotten places. Still, even he couldn't shake the feeling that this place held more than rusted bolts and corroded dreams. Locals whispered about Sloss, once a thriving symbol of Birmingham's industrial heart. It had claimed dozens of lives during its brutal years of operation. Accidents, they said, men falling into vats of molten steel, limbs crushed by gears, suffocated in steam. The most chilling stories, however, weren't about how they died, but how they never truly left. Marcus slung his camera bag over his shoulder and ducked under a bent section of fence. The air inside the grounds was heavier. Even the wind seemed to hush here, as if the place demanded silence. Towering chimneys stood like ancient sentinels, and conveyor belts draped in vines stretched out like the veins of some long-dead creature. He started snapping pictures. Rusted ladders, broken catwalks, shattered windows. But every time he lowered his camera, something fell off, like the shadows moved just a second too late. Like the silence wasn't silent at all. In the main production hall, the giant furnaces loomed, blackened and blistered. The faint smell of iron still hung in the air, decades after the last fire had gone cold. Marcus aimed his lens at the base of one furnace and froze. A shape, just at the edge of the frame, human-shaped. Watching him, he spun around. Nothing, just rows of empty machines and a flickering light bulb swinging from above. "Just a trick of the light," he whispered, but his voice sounded unsure. He took another step, then another, deeper into the complex. With each corner turned, the machinery seemed to close in. The pipes overhead creaked, almost like moaning. He paused to wipe the sweat from his brow despite the cool air, when a sudden noise made him jump, a metallic clang echoing behind him. He turned sharply, camera at the ready. "Hello," his voice cracked. "Anyone there?" Silence. Then, beneath it, so soft it was almost imagined, came a sound that sent chills through his spine. A groan. It wasn't mechanical. It was human. Pained. Distant, yet close. Marcus swallowed hard. He checked his phone. No signal. He cursed, but curiosity dragged him forward. Step by cautious step, he followed the sound. Down a rusted stairwell into the boiler room. The temperature dropped. The boiler room was massive, the walls lined with gauges and valves long since dead. He felt his breath leave fog in the air. Then he heard it again, low and mournful. "Please." Marcus froze. The voice had come from the far side of the room, just beyond a cluster of old machinery. It sounded like a man, weak, desperate. "Who's there?" Marcus asked, inching closer, voice trembling. The only answer was another groan, more urgent this time. He moved around the machinery, heart pounding, and then he saw it. A man, or what looked like a man, hunched over on the ground, clothes tattered, skin so pale it looked gray. He was whispering something Marcus couldn't make out, one hand clutching a twisted metal pipe, as if it were a lifeline. "Sir, are you hurt?" Marcus took a step forward. The figure raised its head. Its eyes were hollow. Not empty, hollow. Like burned-out sockets, black and infinite. Marcus stumbled back. The man, no, the thing, opened its mouth, and the whisper came clearer now. Not English. Something wrong. Wet. Metallic. Behind him, another groan. Then another. More voices. He spun around to see them. Shadows peeling off the walls. Tall, thin silhouettes with glowing embers, where eyes should be. Some dragged limbs. Others moved with unnatural speed, but all of them were converging on him. their mouths murmuring that same awful metallic prayer. Marcus backed up, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The figure on the ground rose slowly, its body bending at angles bones weren't meant to allow. "Help, US!" The thing screamed suddenly in a voice like screeching steel. Marcus turned and ran. He didn't care where. His boots slammed against the rusted floor, echoing through the halls like war drums. The whispers followed, growing louder, chanting now, rhythmic and relentless. He burst into the casting shed and slammed the heavy door behind him. The noise stopped. Panting, Marcus slid to the floor. He looked at his camera, which had been recording the whole time. Hands shaking, he rewound the footage. Nothing. The camera showed him walking alone, speaking into silence. No figures, no voices, not even the man on the ground. It was as if they didn't exist. Except on one frame, a single flickering moment, he saw them. Dozens of them, standing behind him in the boiler room, reaching out. He blinked, and they were gone. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He didn't drive home either. He sat in his truck outside Sloss, staring at the gate, the camera clutched tight in his lap. At exactly 3:03 a.m., he heard it again, through the closed doors, the thick night, and even his own rising scream. The groan. Let's move on to part 2 of the story. The Watcher on Edmund Pettus Bridge. The night was unusually quiet in Selma. It was just past midnight when Eliza parked her rental car near the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The air was thick with humidity, and the silence felt heavier than it should have, like a church with no congregation. She checked her watch again. 12:03 a.m., exactly when the man was said to appear. Eliza was a graduate student from New York, working on a documentary about America's haunted landmarks. Sloss furnaces had been her first stop. What she captured there still haunted her sleep, but the stories from Selma, they intrigued her differently. This wasn't about fire and iron. This was about memory, pain, and something else, something not quite alive, but not willing to be forgotten. She stepped out of the car and slowly approached the bridge, her recorder and camera in hand. The moon hung low, casting the structure in a pale, almost ghostly glow. From a distance, the bridge looked peaceful, noble even, but as Eliza walked closer, her steps echoed strangely, as if the concrete underfoot remembered every march, every cry, every drop of blood. It was said that a man in white appeared on the bridge some nights, never moving, never speaking, just standing there in silence, as if guarding the soul of the place. As Eliza set up her tripod at the midpoint of the bridge, a breeze picked up, sharp and sudden, though the air had been still moments before. The temperature dipped slightly, and the lights from the town behind her seemed to dim. She began recording. Location: Edmund Pettus Bridge, Selma, Alabama. Time: 12:17 a.m. The air feels different, not just heavy charged. She scanned the bridge with her lens. Nothing. And then she saw him. A figure. Far ahead. A man dressed in white. He wasn't there before. Eliza held her breath. Her fingers tightened around the camera, adjusting the focus. The man stood perfectly still, facing down the length of the bridge. He wore an old-fashioned suit, white from head to toe. Not modern, but from another era entirely. His posture was rigid, almost ceremonial, as though he were standing guard at a grave. She whispered, "Sir." No response. "Do you live around here?" Still nothing. He didn't even flinch. He stood as if made of stone, but something about him was undeniably present. Eliza took a cautious step forward, then another. Her recorder clicked softly. "Can you hear me?" she asked again, voice shaky. As she moved closer, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her, faint, multiple, like a crowd. She turned quickly. No one. Only the bridge, stretching back into the dark. She looked again to where the man had stood. He was gone. Eliza's heart skipped. She hadn't blinked. He had been there, clear as day. And now nothing. Just empty bridge, bathed in silver moonlight. Suddenly, the wind returned, more forceful this time. The camera on her tripod shuddered slightly. She grabbed it to keep it steady and played back the last few seconds of footage. He was there, standing. Then, in the span of a single frame, he turned his head, looked directly into the camera, and vanished. She froze. His eyes, they were wide, not with fear, with sorrow. A kind of sorrow that didn't belong to one man, but to an entire generation. Eliza lowered the camera and looked around. The bridge creaked beneath her. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounded soft, like a warning. She started hearing it then. Whispers. Not in the wind, not imagined, but real. They grew louder with each second. No justice. We marched. They beat us. The voices overlapped, like echoes from 100 throats, layered across time. Then the air shifted again. Eliza turned slowly. The man was back, but this time closer. And now he was facing her. His expression unreadable, his skin gray under the moonlight, as if drained of color. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. Her feet rooted to the concrete. The figure raised his hand. Not a threatening gesture. Not a wave. Just a single finger, pointing down, to the surface of the bridge. Eliza followed the motion and looked down. There, scorched into the concrete, was a footprint, burned into the bridge like a brand. Then another appeared, and another. Invisible feet were walking past her, marching, slowly, rhythmically. The bridge trembled slightly under their weight. Dozens, hundreds of unseen marchers. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, not from fear, from something deeper. A shared ache, passed down through the bones of the bridge itself. The man in white lowered his hand. The voices fell silent, and then, as quickly as they had come, the marchers were gone. Only the man remained. He nodded once, solemnly, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the fog at the far end of the bridge. Eliza stood there for a long time, the night silent once more. She never saw him again, but the footage she captured that night would become the most important part of her documentary. Not because it proved the existence of ghosts, but because it proved something else. That places remember, that grief echoes, that some souls return not to haunt, but to remind. And on certain nights, when the air is still and the moon is low, the Edmund Pettus Bridge becomes more than steel and stone. It becomes a memory that refuses to die. Let's move on to part 3 of the story. The whispers of Cahaba Forest. The road to Cahaba twisted like a serpent, flanked on both sides by thick, ancient woods. The trees grew so closely together they blocked out much of the sky, allowing only shards of gray light to pierce through. The air smelled of moss, river silt, and something else, something metallic and old. Marcus had heard the stories growing up, tales of the Cahaba River and the voices that danced along its banks, but he never believed them. Not really. He was a park ranger now, stationed nearby, and his job kept him grounded in the physical, the explainable. Feral pigs, flash floods, disoriented hikers. Those were the threats he understood. Not spirits, not whispers, and certainly not the laughter that people swore echoed through the trees on moonless nights. But something had changed recently. 2 hikers had vanished without a trace over the past month, both on clear, dry days, both seasoned, both last seen near the river bend at marker 12. No bodies, no gear, just gone. So tonight, Marcus walked the trail alone, flashlight in hand, a sidearm strapped to his hip, and a thermal drone watching from above. The forest was oddly still. No birds, no insects, only the crunch of his boots on damp leaves and the steady rush of the river somewhere ahead. He paused at marker 12. The sun was nearly gone now, the woods painted in tones of deep green and black. The Cahaba River shimmered faintly through the trees, its waters darker than oil beneath the fading light. He checked his GPS. Signal good. Time 7:58 p.m. Then the signal dropped. No bars, no map, nothing. Marcus frowned. The drone feed cut out a moment later. Static. He took a step forward. That's when he heard it. A whisper. Soft. In the trees behind him. He turned quickly, flashlight slicing through the undergrowth. "Who's there?" he called. No answer. Another whisper, closer now. Still unintelligible, like someone mumbling underwater. Marcus gripped his light tighter, scanning left to right. Then he heard the sound of water splashing, like someone wading through the river. But the trail was dry, And the river, it was still 20 yards away. He moved forward cautiously, his breath catching. Then laughter, high-pitched, childlike, wrong. It echoed from every direction, bouncing through the trees like a warped nursery rhyme. Marcus's flashlight flickered. He smacked it, steady again. Ahead, just past the trees, he saw something movement. He stepped through the last line of pines and emerged at the riverbank. There was no wind, but the surface of the water rippled violently. And there, across the river, stood a girl, or what looked like one. She wore a pale dress, soaked at the hem, and her hair hung over her face like wet moss. She didn't move, didn't blink. Marcus raised his light. "Hey, you okay? Are you hurt?" The girl slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were pitch black, and her mouth, too wide, unnaturally wide, stretched into a grin that was almost skeletal. Then she laughed. It wasn't human. It wasn't even close. Marcus took a step back, instinct overriding logic. The girl took a step forward, onto the river itself. Not into it, onto it. Her feet didn't sink. She moved across the surface as if it were solid ground, each step leaving no ripple. Marcus drew his weapon. Stop. The laughter stopped. Now the whispers returned louder, all around him. He turned to find a dozen shadows emerging from the trees, tall, thin shapes with eyes like glowing coals. Their mouths didn't move, but the whispers were deafening. Marcus backed away toward the riverbank. The girl stood just feet from him now, still grinning. Then she opened her mouth and screamed. It was not a sound made by lungs. It was a sonic fracture, a sharp, tearing shriek that shattered every thought in Marcus's mind. His ears bled, his knees buckled. He fell, and the forest fell silent. When he came to, the world was upside down, literally. He was dangling from a tree, caught in his own rescue rope. His flashlight was gone, and his radio was fried, hissing quietly like a snake at his belt. Morning light filtered through the canopy. The river was calm again, the forest peaceful. But Marcus knew what he had seen, and more importantly, what he had heard. Voices, faces, echoes that didn't belong to this world. He made it back to base by noon, stumbling out of the woods bruised and shaken. When he checked the drone logs, he found nothing but static. His GPS history was blank. The park cameras near marker 12 had all gone offline simultaneously the night before. But there was one thing left, his body cam. He hadn't remembered turning it on, but it had been recording. The footage showed 15 minutes of walking, and then whispers, then blackness. And in the final seconds, just before the feed cut, there was a single frame of the girl, grinning, looking straight into the lens. Behind her, the river churned violently, and dozens of shadowy figures seemed to rise from beneath its surface. That was the last time Marcus set foot near Cahaba. He filed the report, omitting the supernatural details. But locals say he never went back into the forest again. Some say he saw something he wasn't meant to see. Others say Cahaba let him live, so he could warn the rest. And now, even hikers who don't believe in ghosts say they avoid marker 12, because if you stand too close to the river just after sundown, you'll hear it, water whispering, and something laughing just out of sight. Let's move on to part 4 of the story, the lessons that echo in Aliceville. They say the old school in Aliceville hasn't heard laughter in decades. Not real laughter anyway. The building sits at the edge of town. The roads crack, and weeds grow through the pavement like the earth, trying to reclaim what was once taken. It's been boarded up for years, its windows shattered, the playground rusted and silent. But on certain nights, when the moon is high and full, something stirs within its decaying halls. Locals call it the teacher's school, and they never speak her name aloud. Emma was an amateur photographer, drawn to forgotten places. She had driven through Aliceville by accident, searching for an abandoned textile mill she'd seen on a travel blog. What she found instead was the school, weathered and looming, with vines crawling up its brick walls, and the faded imprint of the school district name barely legible above the door. Aliceville Primary, ST 1924. The moment she saw it, she felt drawn to it. She parked across the street, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting a gold and purple haze across the playground. Something about the silence was unsettling. There were no cars, no birds, just a breeze whispering through a broken flagpole. She slipped inside through a side door. Its lock rusted long ago. Her boots echoed against the dusty tile, stirring up motes of grime in the air. The school smelled of old wood, ash, and something faintly sweet, like scorched paper. She lifted her camera and began snapping pictures. Classrooms frozen in time, desks overturned, chalkboards with ghostly remnants of half-erased words. In one room, a faded sign read, "Today's lesson, responsibility." She continued down the main hallway. That's when she heard it, a faint shuffle, like footsteps. She paused. Then nothing, just the creak of the building settling. Emma chuckled nervously, adjusting her lens. She turned a corner and stopped. A classroom door ahead was open, casting a long, unnatural shadow across the corridor. She didn't remember seeing it open before. The air grew noticeably colder, and then came the voice. Soft, measured, rhythmic, a woman's voice, as if reciting a lesson. Emma froze. The voice echoed from the open classroom, speaking words too faint to understand, but the cadence was unmistakable. It was the tone of someone lecturing, teaching, slowly, carefully. Emma crept forward, her camera still rolling. She peeked into the room. Empty, desks aligned in perfect rows, chalkboard clean, but she could still hear the voice. It was coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. And then it stopped. Abrupt, dead silence. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. Emma screamed, rushing to it, locked. She rattled the knob, kicked it, pounded. Nothing. Then, from behind her, the sound of chalk against a board. Slow, deliberate strokes. She turned. There was no one there, but words were appearing on the chalkboard, letter by letter. "Are you paying attention, Emma?" Her breath caught. She hadn't told anyone her name, hadn't posted about this place, hadn't said it aloud since entering. The chalk began writing again. "Be still. Class is in session." And then, from the back of the classroom, the air shifted. She could feel it before she saw it. A cold presence. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, thin, dressed in the burnt remains of a 1950s style blouse and skirt. Her skin was pale and cracked like old porcelain, and her hair hung in charred clumps across her shoulders. Her eyes were blackened pits, weeping ash. And yet she smiled, the smile of someone whose lesson had gone unfinished, the smile of a teacher returning to her classroom. Emma backed away, heart hammering. "I don't belong here," she whispered. The figure raised one finger to her lips. "Shoo," then pointed to a desk. Emma's legs moved involuntarily, as if pulled by strings. She sat down in the front row, eyes wide, camera trembling in her hands. The ghost floated toward the chalkboard and picked up the chalk again. Lesson 1, fire is a cleansing force. Then the walls began to heat. The smell of smoke returned, stronger this time. Flames licked at the windows, though no fire was visible outside. Emma stood and tried the door again. Still locked. The figure turned, head tilting at an unnatural angle. "We died for ignorance," the spirit said in a voice like broken glass. Then, in a flash, the ghost was inches from Emma's face. "Now you will remember us." When Emma was found the next morning by a local maintenance worker, she was curled up on the front steps of the school, eyes wide and staring at nothing. Her camera was gone. Her hands were covered in chalk dust, and she wouldn't speak for days. When she did, all she would say was, "She's still teaching." She never stopped. To this day, no one enters the Aliceville school after sundown. People claim they still hear lessons being given, footsteps echoing down the halls, chalk scribbling across invisible blackboards, and voices repeating fragments of instruction long forgotten. Some say if you stay too long, you'll become part of her class forever. And if you ever hear her ask, "Are you paying attention?" don't answer, because that's when the lesson begins. And she never, ever lets a student leave early. Let's come to part 5 of the story. The Phantom Rider of Cheaha Mountain. The wind atop Cheaha Mountain sings an old song, one laced with sorrow, solitude, and something darker. At 2,407 feet, Cheaha is the highest point in Alabama. Its forest thick with pines, and its trails often swallowed by low-hanging fog. Hikers love the view from Bald Rock, where the horizon rolls like waves of green. But the locals know there's something else up there, something that doesn't come out until the stars bleed into the sky. They call him the Rider, and they say he's still looking for something or someone. It was late October when Jeremy and his girlfriend Alyssa took the trail up to Cheaha's summit. They were college students from Montgomery, chasing the autumn leaves and a little privacy before winter rolled in. The two brought a tent, snacks, and a camera to catch the fall colors. But Jeremy also brought something else, curiosity for the unexplained. He'd read about the legend online. How, hundreds of years ago, before the mountain bore any paved roads, a lone rider protected the valley. Some said he was a soldier who never returned home. Others claimed he was a native warrior whose spirit lingered after betrayal. The stories differed, but one thing remained the same. The man rode a white horse, never spoke, and never touched the ground. Jeremy didn't believe in ghosts, but he wanted to. That night, after pitching their tent near the cliff's edge, the couple sat beside a small fire, roasting marshmallows under a starlit sky. The trees around them groaned in the wind, their long shadows dancing over stone and earth. At some point after midnight, Alyssa fell asleep. Jeremy, too wired with caffeine and campfire stories, grabbed his flashlight and camera. He followed the rocky ridge path alone, just to see the forest in moonlight. The silence was absolute. No animals, no rustling. Even the wind had stopped. And then he heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate, like something heavy crossing stone. Jeremy turned toward the sound. His flashlight flickered once, then died. He smacked it, cursed, tried to turn it back on. Nothing. And then he saw the glow. A faint silver sheen, coming up the slope from the forest's edge. It wasn't a reflection. It was something moving, something gliding. Jeremy ducked behind a boulder, holding his breath. From between the trees, the rider emerged. He was exactly as the stories described, tall, draped in what looked like a long, tattered military coat. His face was hidden beneath a weather-worn hat, and he sat atop a white horse that shimmered faintly with every step. The horse's hooves never quite touched the ground. They hovered just an inch above it, leaving no prints. The rider looked straight ahead, unmoving, as if locked in memory. And then he stopped. Jeremy didn't move. The rider slowly turned his head. Even from a distance, Jeremy felt it. A sudden, icy weight pressing against his chest. His breath caught. His hands trembled. He wanted to look away, but couldn't. Something ancient and mournful radiated from the figure, like a man doomed to repeat something he could never change. Then, without a sound, the horse turned, and the rider vanished into the woods. Gone. No trace. Jeremy ran back to camp. He didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, he didn't tell Alyssa. Part of him thought it had been a dream, a trick of the light, maybe even fatigue. But something changed in him after that. He became quieter, distracted. In the days that followed, he couldn't stop hearing the hoofbeats, at first in dreams, then during the day, then constantly. A week later, Jeremy disappeared. Alyssa reported him missing. Park rangers searched the entire summit. His phone was found dead near the trail. His camera, though cracked, was discovered at the cliff's edge. The last image on the memory card showed a blurry figure on horseback, impossibly clear, even in low light. No one could explain it. People still hike Cheaha Mountain, though few stay after dark. Some claim they've seen the rider through the trees, especially on foggy nights or just before thunderstorms. Others report hearing hoofbeats behind them, only to turn and find no trail, no prints, no sound. A local park ranger, retired now, once told a story in hushed tones. He was patrolling one autumn evening, just before closing time. A storm rolled in, and he saw a figure standing at the edge of a cliff, coat flapping in the wind. He radioed the man, telling him to come down. No response. He approached, hand on his flashlight. The figure turned and vanished. In its place were hoof prints in the stone. He never worked night shifts again. No one knows what the rider wants. Some believe he's searching for his home. Others think he's bound by duty, unable to leave until the land is safe. And a few whisper that if he ever looks at you directly, your soul becomes tethered to the mountain, destined to ride forever with him. They say that's what happened to Jeremy, and on certain moonlit nights, a second figure is seen, smaller, younger, riding behind the first, silent, trapped, following the path of the forgotten. So if you ever hike Cheaha's winding trails, and the forest grows too quiet, if your flashlight flickers, or you hear distant hoofbeats in the trees, don't stop, don't look, don't listen, because the phantom rider still roams the mountain, eternal alone, and always watching for someone to join him. Let's move on to part 6 of the story, the haunting hymns of Old Cahaba. Old Cahaba is a place where silence has memory, once the bustling first capital of Alabama. It now lies in ruins, crumbling bricks, overgrown paths, and the skeletons of buildings left behind by time. The land breathes with the weight of forgotten lives. Nature has reclaimed it, but some say the dead never truly left. At the heart of the old town stands the remains of an abandoned church. Its weather-worn wooden frame leans with age. The steeple is cracked, its bell long since rusted in place. Ivy coils up its sides like veins on pale skin. The windows, once stained glass, are shattered. Jagged pieces remain like teeth. And on still nights, when the wind doesn't stir the moss, when even the cicadas fall silent, you can hear it, singing, low and distant, like a hymn carried from the edge of another world. The first time Maggie heard it, she thought it was the wind. She was a photographer, drawn to Old Cahaba by its rustic charm and ghost town aesthetic. The site was well known among historical circles and ghost hunters alike, but Maggie wasn't looking for spirits. She wanted texture, shadow, light against decay. She arrived just before dusk, her camera bag slung over her shoulder, tripod clutched in hand. The sun was dipping low, casting long golden rays across broken gravestones. The air was heavy with humidity and the scent of old earth. The church drew her in. Its doors were long gone, leaving only a yawning entrance framed by warped beams. Inside, pews sat askew, some collapsed entirely. Dust lay thick across the floorboards, disturbed only by occasional raccoon tracks. She set up her camera, aiming toward the altar where wildflowers had crept in through a broken wall. The silence was peaceful, meditative. Then came the note, soft, almost like a breath at first. Then it grew clearer, gentle and melodic, echoing through the rotted rafters. A woman's voice, wordless, just a hum that rose into something like a lullaby. Maggie froze, hand hovering over the shutter. She wasn't alone, but when she turned, there was nothing. The pews remained still. The doorway behind her gaped wide into the fading twilight. The singing stopped. Back in her car, Maggie told herself it had been her imagination, acoustics playing tricks. Maybe someone passing on the nearby road with music too loud, but something about it unsettled her. Not just the sound itself, but the feeling it brought. Longing, loss, a grief so deep it seemed embedded into the very walls of the church. She went back the next day, and the next, always at dusk, always drawn to the church, and each time, she heard it again. Sometimes it was just humming. Other nights, full verses emerged, lyrics she couldn't make out, sung in a voice too sorrowful to belong to anything still living. One evening, determined to capture proof, Maggie placed her camera on video mode, left it on the altar, and walked outside to let the church be alone. When she reviewed the footage later, her hands trembled. The screen was dark except for the faint flicker of moonlight through the windows. Then, slowly, the sound began. The same voice. A slow, minor key melody rising like mist. Then movement. A shape in the far corner. Vague, blurred, but unmistakably there. A pale figure, seated in a collapsed pew, facing the altar with head bowed. She wore what looked like a simple dress, old-fashioned, maybe late 1800s. Her hair was long, unkempt. Her shoulders rose and fell with each verse, as if she were praying through the song. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she faded. Gone. Maggie took the footage to local historians in Selma. One elderly woman, a former librarian, watched the video in silence. When it ended, she whispered, "Sarah Ellings." According to her, Sarah was the daughter of a pastor who once preached in that very church during the late 1850s. Records were sparse, but there was a journal entry from a Union soldier who passed through Cahaba during the Civil War. He wrote of a girl with an angelic voice who used to sing hymns to calm the wounded in the pews after the church was converted into a makeshift hospital. The story ended abruptly. It was said that a fever swept through the camp. Sarah caught it tending to the sick. She died in that very church. Some say her final act was to sing a lullaby to a dying soldier as the light left her eyes. Word spread fast in local circles after Maggie's discovery. Ghost hunters, mediums, thrill seekers. They all came, hoping to hear the song or see the lady in white. Some did. Most didn't. A few claimed to see candlelight in the windows, though no one had lit one in years. One man collapsed just inside the church, whispering that the voice reminded him of his late wife. Another woman left crying, unable to explain why. The most chilling story came from a park ranger who locked the grounds one night and returned at dawn to find dozens of wilted wildflowers arranged in the shape of a cross in front of the altar. No footprints, no animals, just flowers and silence. Locals have learned to respect the church. They don't go near it after dark. They say if you listen too long, the song stays with you. It echoes in your dreams, in your home, in your heart. And if you return again and again, the voice grows louder, closer, until one day, you hear it not from the church, but from behind you. So if you ever find yourself in old Cahaba, and the moon is high, and the breeze carries something more than just wind, don't follow the sound. Don't sing along, because the one who sings, sings for the dead, and someday she may sing for you. Let's get to part 7 of the story, the ghost girl of Highway 280. Highway 280 stretches through Birmingham like a steel artery pulsing with restless traffic. By day, it hums with life, commuters, delivery trucks, travelers on their way to somewhere else. But at night, under the eerie glow of passing headlights, something else walks the shoulder of that road, something that doesn't belong to the living. They call her the ghost girl of 280. Drivers have spoken of her for years, whispers traded in truck stops and late-night diners. They all describe the same thing, a girl, young and pale, standing by the roadside in a white dress that flutters despite the still air. Her eyes, when visible, are void, black orbs empty of expression. When cars approach, she doesn't move. And then, just as suddenly as she appears, she's gone. Some say they've nearly hit her. Some say she walks into the road. And some swear she's appeared in their rearview mirror, sitting silently in the back seat, only to vanish with the blink of an eye. Tyler was a skeptic, a software engineer by trade. Tyler didn't believe in anything he couldn't measure or code. His world was binary, true or false, real or imaginary. He had heard the urban legend, of course, everyone local had, but like most, he dismissed it as campfire nonsense, until the night he took the late shift and left the office around 2:30 a.m., heading home along Highway 280. The air was thick with summer humidity. His headlights cut through the darkness, catching trees, road signs, and empty intersections. Music played low on the radio, an old country song he barely noticed, and then he saw her. At first, it was just a flicker, a blur of white in his peripheral vision. He slowed down instinctively, eyes scanning the side of the road. There, about 30 feet ahead, she stood, a girl, maybe 17, 18, barefoot. Her long dress hung loosely around her frame, the hem soaked from the wet grass. Her hair was tangled, her skin pale and luminous under the beams of his headlights. She didn't look at him. She stared into the woods across the highway. Tyler's foot hovered over the brake. Should he stop? Call the police? What was a girl doing out here alone at this hour? Before he could decide, she turned her head and looked directly at him. Her eyes were like ink, dark, vacant, unreadable. Tyler slammed the brakes. His car skidded slightly, but when it came to a stop and he looked again, she was gone, vanished, not a trace, not a footstep. He stepped out, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. He called out. Nothing answered. No movement in the trees. No rustle in the grass. Just a low hum of crickets and the faint smell of rain. Back in his car, Tyler locked the doors. He didn't sleep that night. He kept turning over the image in his mind. Her posture, the way she turned, the feeling in his gut that she hadn't just been lost. She had been waiting. The next day, he dove into online forums, Reddit threads, paranormal blogs, local news reports. The stories poured in, all with eerie similarities. I saw her near the mile marker by Cahaba River Road. She was just standing there barefoot, staring at me. When I stopped, she was gone. One trucker posted dash cam footage, grainy, but clear enough to make out a shadowy figure by the shoulder. Another woman claimed she stopped to offer help, only to find the girl's face expressionless, lips moving silently, mouthing words she couldn't hear. One word, however, kept appearing in the reports: home. People said they heard her whisper it. Some swore they saw it written in the condensation on their windshield after she vanished. Tyler became obsessed. He drove the same stretch of Highway 280 for nights on end, trying to recreate the moment. Sometimes he'd park near the location, camera ready, windows down. He began to dream of her. In one dream, he was driving, and she appeared in the middle of the road. But instead of vanishing, she stepped in front of his car, slowly, deliberately. He woke up to find his car alarm blaring in the driveway and muddy footprints on the hood, leading upward. Desperate for answers, he visited the Birmingham Public Library archives. He found an article from 1983. Teen dies in tragic hit-and-run on Highway 280. A 17-year-old girl named Emily Cates had been walking home late from her boyfriend's house when she was struck and killed near Cahaba River Road. The driver was never found. Locals said her spirit lingered, unable to rest. The date? June 14th. Tyler checked his calendar. That was the night he saw her. He returned to the road on the anniversary the following year, parked by the shoulder. Midnight. No lights, no music, just the night. And then she was there, standing by the trees. Closer this time. Her dress, now tattered. Her hair hanging like damp rope. Her face sad. Not angry, not vengeful, just lost. Tyler opened the door. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He simply whispered, "Emily, go home." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the trees, fading with every step until the darkness took her. Since then, sightings have declined. Some say she's finally at rest. Others believe she still walks, not every night, but when the veil is thin, when memory lingers in the air like fog. So if you're ever driving down Highway 280 after midnight, and you see a girl in a white dress by the road, don't stop. Don't look her in the eyes. And if she speaks, whatever you do, don't answer. Because not every soul on that highway is headed where you're going. And some are looking for someone to take them home. Let's get to part 8 of the story, the Phantom Soldier of Fort Morgan, along the windswept coastline of Alabama. Where the Gulf's waves break against time-worn stones, stands Fort Morgan, a massive star-shaped stronghold that once echoed with the clamor of cannon fire and the cries of men in battle. Built to guard Mobile Bay, this ancient sentinel has seen sieges, storms, and silence, but some say it has never truly emptied. At night, long after the last tourist is gone and the sea air thickens with salt and memory, the fort becomes something else. A gateway between then and now, and among its shadows, one figure walks alone. A soldier, clad in the tattered gray uniform of the Confederate South. They say he patrols the ramparts, rifle in hand, boots heavy on stone. Some have heard distant gunfire echo from nowhere. Others claim to see flashes of light in the powder magazines, or hear muffled voices reciting orders no living soul would issue today. Lena Harwell was a history graduate student at Auburn University. She had a passion for the Civil War, its politics, its people, and especially its forgotten locations. When her professor offered her a chance to research on-site at Fort Morgan for a summer thesis, she jumped at the opportunity. "I want to study battlefield psychology," she said. "How the trauma lingers, how memory stays etched into walls. She didn't expect the memory to reach back. The first few days were ordinary, hot, humid, filled with documentation. She photographed artillery rooms, mapped out soldier quarters, and cataloged names scratched into the bricks. She camped just outside the fort's main entrance, sleeping in her small tent under the stars, with only the distant crash of waves for company. On the fifth night, just after midnight, she was reviewing notes inside the fort's inner courtyard when she heard it. A single sharp crack. Not thunder. A gunshot. She froze. Then another, and another, echoing across the empty barracks like a battlefield replayed. She rushed outside, flashlight in hand. But the parade ground was empty. No footsteps. No wind. Only a strange scent lingered in the air. Gunpowder. The hairs on her arms rose. She chalked it up to stress, the mind playing tricks in an environment charged with emotion. But the next night, she saw him. She had returned to the upper wall, hoping to catch the sunrise over the bay, when movement caught her eye below. At first, it was just a shape, shadowy, hunched, deliberate. But as it stepped into the open moonlight, her breath caught. A man, late 30s, lean and tall, dressed in Confederate gray, buttons dulled with age, boots coated in sand. A rusted rifle lay across his shoulder. His face was pale, angular, but stern, his eyes fixed ahead like he was on guard duty. He didn't look like a reenactor. He didn't look alive. Lena stood still, too afraid to speak, heart pounding. Then, slowly, he turned. Their eyes met. No malice, no warmth, just recognition, like he saw her, not as a stranger, but as someone who didn't belong. Then he vanished. No steps, no sound, just gone. Back at camp, she replayed it again and again. She wasn't the type to scare easily, and she believed in rational explanations. But that face, it had looked too real, too detailed. A trick of the mind didn't cast a shadow. She dove into the fort's archives the next morning. There, buried among casualty lists and faded dispatches, she found a letter. Private Thomas Granger, Company F. Last seen August 23rd, 1864. Standing watch after midnight. He never answered roll call. Searched the grounds. No trace. Left his belongings in mess hall. Some say he ran. I say he just faded. The letter wasn't signed. The date of the disappearance? 2:03 a.m. The time she had seen him? Exactly 2 a.m. Lena stayed another week. Each night, she returned to the courtyard with her notebook, whispering aloud to the air, "Thomas Granger, are you still watching?" On her last night, as clouds swallowed the moon and the wind howled through the old cannons, she heard footsteps, measured, slow, marching. She turned toward the northern wall. There he was, this time closer. He didn't seem surprised to see her. He stopped about 15 feet away. She raised her lantern. He lifted his hand, not in greeting, but in salute. Then, as if called by a voice only he could hear, he turned and walked through the stone wall. No door, just through it. In the years since, Lena has told the story during lectures and conferences. She even published her thesis, Stone Echoes, Fort Morgan and the Ghosts of Collective Memory. But she never returned. Others have, and they've seen him too. Guards patrolling the grounds report a man standing still by the ramparts. Visitors have heard boots scraping above them when no one is there. A woman claimed a voice whispered, "Stay alert," in her ear while she stood alone in the powder room. So if you ever visit Fort Morgan, walk its halls with respect. You may not see the ghosts, but they see you. And one of them is still guarding a post he was never relieved from, even after 160 years. Let's get to part 9 of the story. The lights over Lake Guntersville, nestled among the Appalachian foothills. Lake Guntersville stretches across the northeast corner of Alabama like a great silver serpent. Calm by day, it transforms at night into something far more enigmatic, especially when the winds are still and the sky is moonless. Locals tell of lights, soft glowing orbs that rise silently from the surface of the water and float just above it, drifting aimlessly before disappearing into the mist. Some say they dance. Others say they hover and watch, The old-timers, though, speak in hushed voices. Them lights ain't stars. They're souls. The ones who went down and never came back up. It was just past summer when Elliot Wade, a retired journalist from Birmingham, decided to spend a quiet week at a rented lakeside cabin. After 30 years of chasing stories, he craved silence. Lake Guntersville, with its gentle breezes and thick forests, promised peace. He brought books, a fishing rod, and no cell phone. By the third night, he'd found a rhythm. Early mornings with coffee and fog, lazy afternoons by the dock, and evenings spent staring at the lake, letting his thoughts wander. But on the fourth night, something changed. It was just past 11 p.m. A deep fog had rolled in, blanketing the water in a thick, motionless sheet. Elliot stood by the porch railing, sipping lukewarm tea, when he noticed a glow, small and pale, hovering just above the lake's surface. He squinted. Then another appeared, a few feet away. Then a third. They moved in silence, slow and deliberate, like lanterns caught in a current he couldn't see. Curious, he grabbed his binoculars, but as he raised them, the lights flickered and vanished. He waited. Minutes passed. The water remained still. Then one reappeared, much closer this time. The following morning, Elliot asked the owner of the small lakeside grocery about the lights. "You seen 'em?" The man said, not surprised. "Most folks do, if they stay long enough." "What are they?" The man shrugged, but his eyes drifted toward the water. "Stories go way back. Before the dam, before the lake. Used to be a town down there. Whole community. Cemetery, too. A town. Yep. Old Guntersville. Some buildings moved, some didn't. A lot of graves got lost when they flooded the valley. Folks say them lights are souls still trying to find their way home." Elliot didn't believe in ghosts, but he'd seen them, and something about their motion, the rhythm, the way they pulsed, reminded him of breathing. That night, he brought his camera and tripod to the dock, hoping to catch them again. Around midnight they came. 6 this time, blue-white, almost the color of frost, gliding above the lake in near silence. He snapped photos, adjusted exposure, but no matter what setting he used, the camera refused to capture them. Every shot showed only darkness and fog. He watched instead, mesmerized. Then something strange. One of the lights broke away from the rest and began moving toward him. He backed up instinctively, heart racing, though the light moved slowly, gently, almost inquisitively. It hovered near the dock's edge for a moment, then dipped low toward the water. And then Elliot heard it. A voice. Faint. Female. Singing. Just a few notes, carried on the mist, as if echoing across time. Then silence. He didn't sleep that night. The song lingered in his mind, soft and incomplete, like a lullaby forgotten mid-verse. It wasn't just eerie, it was sorrowful. The next morning, Elliot visited the Guntersville Public Library. He found old records about the dam project, the valley flooding, families relocated. But one article caught his attention, a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1938, local tragedy. Fisherman's family drowns in river days before reservoir filling. It described a small fishing boat capsizing near the mouth of Town Creek. A mother and her 2 children were swept under. Only the father survived. Their bodies were never recovered. Elliot closed the file. Town Creek emptied directly into the part of the lake where he had seen the lights. That evening, Elliot rowed a small boat out just beyond the dock, into the mist that thickened after sundown. He didn't bring a camera this time, just himself. He drifted, waiting, and just before midnight, they appeared. The lights, but this time, they circled the boat. 5, 6, 7. They moved with intention, like they recognized him. One passed directly overhead, and for a moment, everything went still, soundless, timeless. And then images. Not visions, not quite, just feelings. Weight, cold, desperation, hands reaching for the surface. A lullaby sung over water. A man screaming his family's names into the current. Elliot gasped. He hadn't heard a story. He had lived it. Just for a second. Then the lights drifted back toward the center of the lake and faded into the dark. He left the cabin the next morning, didn't speak of what he saw for years, not until much later, when he published a short memoir titled The Ones Who Still Float. A quiet reflection on grief, memory, and the strange persistence of the past. The lights still appear over Lake Guntersville. Some nights they're faint, others they're vivid, blazing white or gentle blue. Some say they move toward boats. Some say they sink below and never rise again. But always they return. So if you ever find yourself by the shores of Lake Guntersville on a foggy night, look carefully across the water. And if you see a light, drifting, patient, soundless, don't be afraid. They are not trying to frighten you. They're just looking for a way back. Let's get to part 10 of the story. The Bride of Chateau Vestavia. High on a hill in Vestavia, hill surrounded by ivy-covered stone walls and windswept oaks, sits a mansion locals call Chateau Vestavia. Its red-tiled roof and Gothic arches give it the appearance of an old European manor, though it was built in the early 1900s by a wealthy industrialist with a flair for the romantic and tragic. The chateau has long stood empty, but those who walk past on quiet nights often report seeing a light in the upper window, a pale figure in white, motionless, as if waiting. Others speak of a whispering voice in the halls, or the soft echo of footsteps on the grand marble staircase. They say the mansion is haunted by a bride, a young woman who died on the night she was meant to be married, her soul trapped in eternal longing. It began in the spring of 1929. Eliza Belmore, the only daughter of the Belmore family, owners of coal mines and railroads, was set to marry a young man named Thomas Loring, a naval officer recently returned from overseas. Their courtship had been brief but passionate, fueled by long letters, stolen moments, and a shared dream of escaping the rigid expectations of Southern society. Eliza was beautiful, independent, and well-educated. Thomas was kind, with eyes that always seemed to search for something more. The wedding was to be the grandest the town had ever seen. Chateau Vestavia was chosen as the venue, an extravagant setting for a love that seemed to defy even time. But fate, as it so often does, had other plans. On the morning of the wedding, clouds rolled over the hills, and a strange silence fell over the estate. Servants moved through the halls with an unease they couldn't name. Birds avoided the tall trees. The wind carried a scent not of flowers, but of iron and rain. Then came the telegram. Thomas's carriage, en route from Montgomery, had overturned on a rain-slick road. A runaway horse, a broken wheel, a sharp turn at the wrong moment. He was dead before help could reach him. Eliza never left her dressing room. They say she stood before the mirror in her wedding gown for hours, her veil draped over her face, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Guests were turned away. Musicians packed up. The priest was offered tea and silence. Eliza's mother knocked gently on the door, whispering words of comfort, of faith. But no answer came. At dusk, a maid entered with a tray of food and found the bride collapsed on the floor, her hands still clutching the letter Thomas had written her just days before. There were no wounds, no marks, but she was gone. Some say her heart simply broke. The Belmores left the mansion shortly after and never returned. Over the years, Chateau Vestavia changed hands many times, briefly becoming a boarding school, then an artist retreat, then sitting vacant for decades. Each new tenant spoke of strange happenings, music with no source, sudden drops in temperature, and always the woman in white. In 1986, a group of architecture students were granted permission to photograph the estate for a preservation project. One student, Rachel Durnell, captured a series of interior shots with an old 35mm camera. Most came out beautifully, but one, taken in the Grand Hall, showed something unexpected. A faint outline of a woman standing at the bottom of the staircase. Her dress shimmered like old lace. Her head was tilted, as if listening. The students insisted the room had been empty. The photo remains in the university archive, labeled only Figure at Chateau. In more recent years, stories have only grown. A caretaker who lived on site for a brief period claimed that late at night, he would hear the sound of heels on tile, moving slowly, as though someone were walking the long corridor toward the balcony. Others have heard weeping from the upstairs rooms, soft, barely audible, like wind through a keyhole. One particularly chilling account came from a local historian, Mrs. Angela Price, who had been researching the Belmore family for a documentary. While alone in the library room of the chateau, she reported the following. I was reading Eliza's diary, yes, it still exists, and suddenly, I felt something behind me. Not threatening, just present. I turned, and I swear to you, someone had written words into the condensation on the window. Only one word. Wait. Today, Chateau Vestavia remains closed to the public. Nature has begun to reclaim it. Vines crawling up the stone walls, owls nesting in the rafters, and the fountain in the courtyard long dry. But sometimes, people still come. Brides mostly. Drawn by the legend, they stand by the gate in their gowns and take photographs, hoping to catch a glimpse of Eliza. Some say doing so brings good luck. Others say it invites the wrong kind of attention. The truth is, Eliza is still there. Her spirit bound not by anger or vengeance, but by something gentler yearning. She walks the halls in her wedding gown, still waiting for the man who never arrived. So if you ever find yourself near Chateau Vestavia at dusk, and you see a figure in white gazing from the upstairs window, don't be afraid. She doesn't mean to frighten. She's just waiting, waiting still, for the sound of footsteps on the gravel path, for a knock at the door, for the life that ended before it could begin.